Richard Gere walks off Jimmy Kimmel's stage after intense confrontation about his activism turning a standard interview into a heated battle. What ignited this fiery walkout? Let's take a closer look. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment with where you're watching from. Let's see who's here for this legendary battle. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio in Los Angeles. Comes alive, lights, bright crowd. A buzz with excitement. Richard Gere, the legendary actor and committed philanthropist, is the headline act tonight's His Quiet Presence packing the room. He's here to market his upcoming film, a drama of refugee adversity linked to his decades-long activism as a human rights advocate. Gere's no greenhorn on daytime chat shows, but he's intensely dedicated to his issues, and Kimmel's reliance on lighthearted jabbing may get on his nerves. Gere hopes to keep attention on the work, not barbs, and getting off track puts at risk his eye. Backstage, the vibes already taught Gere's longtime friend and advisor Sarah, a calm but resolute advocate, warned the producers, stick to the film and his work, no cheap shots. She knows Gere's deep commitment to his causes and his disdain for flippant treatment. And her words are non-negotiable. The producers nod, but their whispers hint at plans for a playful bit thinking. Garrett's charm will smooth any edges, Sarah's not convinced, her eyes narrowing as she watches them plot. They're playing with fire, she grumbles to a stagehand, who shrugs out of the loop. In the green room, Gere's sipping tea, looking at a monitor as Jimmy Kimmel starts the show. Jimmy's in his element, his monologue skewering celebrity quirks. The crowd laughing. Gere's face is unflappable, but his fingers clutch the cup. A telltale sign Sarah knows he's preparing for a test. The stage manager gives the cue. It's time, and Gere stands, adjusts his scarf, and makes for the curtain. No fuss, just a man about to meet the spotlight. Out on stage, Jimmy's rapping a little about a viral charity prank. The audience laughing on cue. He moves to Gere's intro, his voice warm. The one and only Richard Gere. The band strikes a soulful chord. The crowd goes wild, and Gere emerges. His stride measured, a polite smile in place. He shakes Jimmy's hand, brief, and sits. His posture eased but eyes alert. The cheers die down and the air thickens. The room attentive to the two men in the lights. Jimmy begins safe questioning about the movie, its themes of displacement and hope. Gere leans in, his voice warm, sincere, tackling the refugee crisis, linking it to his work with international organizations. The crowd is with him, nodding, drawn in by his sincerity. But Jimmy's got a show to produce, and he's seeking a lighter atmosphere. He throws in a tongue-in-cheek remark about Gere's jet-setting, activist existence, inquiring if he ever gets a break from saving the world. Gere's smile tenses his response brief. It's not concerning me. The audience laughs, but there is an understanding in his voice. One Jimmy misses, feeling an opportunity to tease. Jimmy switches, drawing up a tabloid article on Gere's headline-grabbing charity galas, smirking. So Richard is everything business meetings, or do you slip in some partying with the elite? The crowd guffaws, some gasping, purchasing the jab. Jerry's eyes flashing, his jaw set. That's not what this is, he declares, his voice low, resolute. The studio silenced Jimmy's smirk, breaking down, Sarah in the sidelines muttering, "Here it comes." Gere leaning forward, his tone edgier. "I'm here to discuss serious issues, not your flippant spin." The crowd stirs, sensing the heat, and this confrontation is about to explode. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio grows silent. Richard Gere's strong words. "I'm here to discuss hard issues, not your flip approach, cutting through the air like a lash." Jimmy Kimmel taken aback by the rebuff attempts to deflect it with a laugh. His chuckle strained, uneasy. "All right, Richard, all business tonight," he says. Brushing aside the jibe, but the audience toughened their laughter now, a tense hum. Gere's eyes remain fixed on Jimmy, his annoyance with the good-natured digs at his activism, seething, a storm waiting to erupt. Backstage, Sarah's fists are tight, her whisper to the stage manager, acerbic. Told him to keep it honest. The stage manager flustered signals the control booth to prepare a commercial. But the director's holding back ratings, climbing with each second of Gere's passion. Jimmy, picking up on the atmosphere sour, adjusts his tie, attempting to shift back to the interview. "Let's discuss more about your film," he says, his voice coaxing calm, hoping to restart. He asks about the refugee narrative, trying to draw out Gere's enthusiasm for the cause. Gere responds, his voice warm, steady, plunging into the human toll of displacement. His work with refugees anchoring his language. But then he stops, leaning in, his tone getting tougher. "That's what this ought to be," he states accusingly at Jimmy. "Not your beneath you cheap shots for laughs." The punch connects, and the audience responds. Some clapping, others gasping, the room splitting into camps. Jimmy's smile falters, his fingers wrapping the desk. He's weathered difficult guess, but gears. Frustration is tearing his show apart. He attempts to turn asking about the production challenges of the film, but Gere's not letting it go. "You're missing it," he interrupts Jimmy, his voice rising ever so slightly. "I came here to discuss something that counts not to be your punchline for tabloid spins." The audience murmurs, some yelling, "Go Richard," while others boo. Confusing it for drama, Jimmy looks at the floor producer, who's also telling them to move on. But Gere's voice gets pointed, his anger evident. "This entire arrangement," he says, gesturing toward the set, "it's aimed at cheapening what exists." The noise of the crowd builds, feeding from Gere's bereavement. Jimmy Throne attempts to lean into laughter with a grin. "Hey Richard, we are only fooling around." "No offense," he says. But the phrase is hollow and the audience knows it. Gere shakes his head, slow, deliberate, joking. He speaks, his voice thick with disdain. "People think they want your fluff instead of real issues. They want substance." Some of the crowd are cheering while others jeer. The studio crackle of tension. Sarah in the wings whispers, "They're in deep now." The security team, 2 men in suits, move closer to the stage, but they're holding back, mindful of Gere's gravitas. Backstage, the producers are racing, voices on top of each other in the control booth. The director's torn, the numbers are massive, but this is out of control. "Let it play, but be prepared to cut." He orders. Jimmy remains on stage, attempts to take control, inquiring about Gere's. Co-stars hoping deference will do. But Gere's tired of the script. "You don't get it," he replies in his calm tone, cutting. "You think you can spin my work into a joke. I'm here for the cause, not your jokes." The crowd erupts, some chanting his name, others screaming for Jimmy to push back. Jimmy's calm shatters, his eyes narrowing. He leans in, dropping the nice guy routine. "Look, Richard, we brought you here to discuss," he says, his voice biting. "Maybe express some thanks for that." That's the spark. Jar's eyes glint, his voice low, biting. "Thanks," he says, his anger heightening. "For what? Reducing my life's work to your shallowness." The audience is lost. The commotion rattling the set. Some standing, shooting, others yelling. Jimmy's face reens, his hands holding the desk. The floor director calls for a break, but the cameras roll. The moment too large to halt, Jimmy stands, trying to assert control. "All right, we'll take a brief break, folks," he says, smiling unsuccessfully. The band is launched, but Gere's not turning, his gaze relentless, and the crowd's humming, aware that this battle over substance far from over. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio is a tempest. The band's rash riff colliding with the crowd's spiraling cheers. Alcohol and cries of Richard's name as Jimmy Kimmel pleads for a commercial break. Jimmy's standing gestures to the crowd, his forced smile attempting to convey control. But his gaze skips to the floor producer, who's waving wildly, telling him to cut. The cameras, however, continue rolling. The director in the booth, addicted to the breaking ratings. Gere hasn't moved, his gaze fixed on Jimmy, his anger at the flip jabs about his activism, a fierce, unyielding force backstage. Sarah's glaring at the producers, her voice low, sharp. "You set him off." The security team hovering near the stage shifts, uneasily, waiting for orders. As the band fades, Jimmy sits leaning toward Gere, his voice low off mic, but the front row catches snippets. "Let's just finish this, Richard," he says, a mix of plea and irritation. Gere's response is a murmur. "You crossed a line?" The crowd's buzzing. Phones up, recording. The moment already spreading online. Jimmy, feeling the room slip, tries to rally the audience, raising his hands. "Folks, we've got Richard Gere, let's give it up." The applause is spotty, drowned by shouts. Some for Gere, others for Jimmy to push back. The room's a powder keg, and Gere's fight for serious discussion is the spark. Gere sits tall, his posture composed, his face resolute. He's not here for claps, he's here to fight for his cause. The stage manager, sweating, indicates Jimmy to finish, but Jimmy's not stepping back. He seizes a cue card, questioning the film's refugee storyline. Attempting to turn to safe zone, Gere cuts him off, his voice warm but stinging. "You're still not getting it," he says loudly enough for the mics. "I came to discuss real human struggles, not to fuel your tabloid spin." The crowd erupts, some standing, cheering, others booing. The gulf wide, Jimmy's jaw tightens, his characteristic charm cracking under Gere's unstoppable pressure. The host attempts a laugh, but it's artificial, Richard. It's only an act, he claims, nodding to the set. "We're here to brighten things up," Gere's eyes flashing, his voice lowering, intentional. "Lighten your devaluing lives for humor, not problems." The words land with a slap, and the crowd responds. Some yelling support, others jeering. The din overwhelming Sarah in the wings smiles grimly, understanding Gere's in command. The security men move closer, their presence more oppressive, but they're careful, sensitive to Gere's commanding presence. Behind stage, the producers are in disarray, voices squawking in the control room, the director's on the spot. The numbers are tremendous, but this unfolding, keep going but ready to cut, he growls. Jimmy on stage makes one final attempt to guide events, inquiring about Gere's most recent charity endeavor, his voice nearly desperate. But Gere is finished with the game. "You're wasting my time," he says, his voice like a whip. "This isn't about my film anymore. It's about you, thinking you can mock my work for ratings." The crowd's on its feet, some chanting, Richard others, arguing, the studio pulsing with their energy. Jimmy's patience snaps. He leans forward, his voice sharp, dropping the host's polish. "Richard, we brought you here to talk," he says, pointing at the desk. "Show some respect for that." It's error. Gere's eyes flash with anger, and he leans his voice low, biting. "Respect's earned," he states, "not by twisting my cause into your cut rate bit." The crowd cheers the din, ear-blinding some videoing others screaming. The director at last calls the halt. The monitor's winking to commercial, but Gere still sits, his glare unyielding. Jimmy stands speechless to the floor. Producer, his motions hysterical. The house lights flicker, the band's taciturn and security moving in. But Sarah's already moving, ready to back Gere. The audience is restless, sensing the fight over substance is far from done. And the stage is primed for a reckoning. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio is a restless vortex, the commercial break doing little to cool the crowd's energy as they mutter some chanting. Richard Gere's name, others bickering in the seats. The monitors flash with ads, but the cameras remain live, capturing every moment for the feed. Gere hasn't budged. His stance, steady eyes locked on the desk where Jimmy Kimmel stands, his annoyance at the flippant barbs regarding his activism a blazing force Jimmy off stage. His voice clipped as he spars with the floor producer, gesturing wildly. Sarah's in the wings, her gaze fixed on the security team. Two wide men in suits, now near the stage, intense but watchful. The director's voice crackles over headsets. "Get Jimmy back, but keep it in check." The pause puts out the lights, flashing up, the band blundering into a short riff. Jimmy has his smile, thin, seated with forced ease that won't cover his tension. "We're on with Richard Gere," he says, in his voice laying on the warmth. But the crowd's welcome is spasmodic. The room's still tense from Gere's take on hard discussion. Jimmy attempts to change gears, inquiring into the film's refugee issues, hoping to pin things down to Gere's intensity. G replies, his voice steady, warm, talking about the human cost of displacement. But then he changes his tone, biting. "That's what this ought to be," he says, gesturing at the set. "Not your flimsy spin for laughs." The audience stirs some cheering, others shifting. The divide apparent, Jimmy's fingers clench a cue card, his smile fading. "We're just keeping it light, Richard," he says, reclining, appealing to the audience. That's the show, right? Some cheer, but boos overwhelm them, the room leaning toward Gere's passion. Fun Gere speaks, his voice low, sharp. "You're trivializing actual suffering for ratings, not fun." The audience cheers, some of them, standing up, clapping, others, shouting for Jimmy to push back. Sarah, observing, mutters, "He's got the room." The security guards creep closer, their presence more weighty, but they're still in reserve. Jimmy's control phrase, his voice booming. "Richard, you're a guest here," he says, gesturing at the desk. "We're extending to you respect, maybe return some." The crowd senses the challenge, their noise surging. Gere's eyes narrow, his jaw set. "Respect," he says, his voice steady, fierce. "You don't earn it by making fun of my work for cheap gags." The words sting like a jab, and the audience explodes, some chanting. Richard, others booing, the studio, shaking. Jimmy's face flushes, his hands clutching the desk. He attempts to laugh, but it's empty. "This is a talk show, Richard, not a UN meeting," he says, his tone biting. "You want to preach, find another stage?" That's the spark. Gere leans in, his voice clear, unyielding. "I came to discuss human lives," he says, nodding to the audience. "You made it about your shallow moments. I don't play that game." The audience erupts, some standing, photographing, others yelling, the set shuddering with their energy. Jimmy stands, breaking the host's rule, his voice escalating. "You know what, Richard? If you don't like it, you don't have to stay." It's raw, a direct shot, and the audience loses it. The noise deafening, Sarah moves closer to the stage, her eyes on Gere, ready to step in. The floor producer signals security, whispering, "Be ready." The guards move, their steps heavy. Gere doesn't stand, but his presence fills his eyes fixed on Jimmy, his frustration a palpable force. "Maybe I won't," he utters, his voice calm, piercing. The crowd roars, some cheering, his defiance, others jeering, the room a battlefield. Jimmy's had enough, his face red, pointing at Gere. "Then go," he says, his voice loud. "Final." The audience gasps, the noise peaking, some standing recording. The director's yelling to cut, but the cameras keep rolling. The moment too massive to stop Gere's unmoving, his stare, unrelenting, and the stage is a heartbeat from chaos. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio is a crucible, Jimmy Kimmel's sharp command, "Then go," unleashing a torrent of cheers, boos, and shouts of Richard Gere's name. Gere, still seated, confronts Jimmy's glare with a peaceful, piercing gaze, his anger at the flippant jabs about his activism, a fierce, uncompromising force. The crowd is on its feet, some chanting for Gere, others encouraging Jimmy, phones up, streaming the mayhem live. The cameras disregarding the director's frantic pleas, keep rolling, feeding the clash to millions. Backstage, Sarah's composed, her eyes flicking between Gere and the security team. Now steps off the stage, hands prepared but watchful. The floor producer's voice is loud, urging Jimmy to calm down, but the host's too deep in the brawl. Jimmy, his face red, points at Gere again, his voice strained. "We gave you a forum for your film," he says to the audience. "You don't get to ruin it." The crowd responds, some cheering Jimmy, others jeering the commotion. A tidal wave, Gere leaning forward, his voice distinct, cutting trash it. "You're the one pandering to suffering for laughs." The audience gasps, then erupts, some clapping at his booth. Others amazed, the set shaking with their intensity. Sarah in the wings smiles a thin smile, breaking knowing Gere's. On the moral high ground, Jimmy's throne, his mouth opening. But Gere doesn't waver, his tone even unrelenting. "You think folks want your light gags they want to listen to about hard issues, real lives." The audience erupts, some rising, cheering, others screaming, the room splitting further. The security guards take a step forward, his voice firm but cautious. "Sir, time to leave," he says. Aware of Gere's size, Gere halts, his gaze freezing. The guard cold, calm but firm. "I'll leave when I'm ready," he declares, his voice unshakable. Sarah advances, her voice cutting. He goes on his own terms. She snaps at the floor producer, who's floundering, overmatched Jimmy, hurt by Gere's words. Attempts to rally, sitting back down, his voice trembling. "Richard, you're making tougher than it has to be," he says. But the crowds with equipment, their applause drowning Jimmy's words. Equipment stands still, measured, his presence looming. His battle for serious talk. "Adamantine tough," he says, addressing the audience with a piercing stare. "This man believes refugee lives are a joke. Who's with me on seeking substance?" The crowd erupts, some shouting. Richard, others recording his stand, a masterclass in conviction. The floor producer signals security again, whispering, "Get him off." The guards hold back, but one steps forward, pointing to. "Gee, sir, please," he says, near pleading. Gere doesn't look at him, his gaze on Jimmy, administering one final blow. "Keep your jokes, Jimmy, they're not worth my time." The audience loses it. Cheers and gasps rocking the set. Jimmy's face searing with the sting of Gere's words. Gere turns, walking off stage, his pace deliberate. Sarah by his side. Jimmy left alone, the band kicking in awkwardly. "Well, that was Richard Gere," he says, trying to force a laugh, but his voice cracks. Gere's stand leaving him shaken. The audience's reaction is divided. The energy splintered backstage. The producers are in freefall, the director screaming about damage control. Sarah trails behind Gere to the green room, where he picks up his scarf, unfazed. "Told him to keep straight face?" Sarah grumbles. Gere merely nods. His point made, the internet's aflame, clips of Gere's walk-off going viral. Fans are lauding his determination, others arguing the confrontation. The show falters on Jimmy, racing through the last bits, his polish dented by Gere's unflinching stance, a moment that'll set the standard for talk show battles for years. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio still shaking. The echo of Richard Gere's farewell salvo. "Keep your jokes, Jimmy. They're not worth my time." Ringing as the crowd's cheers, liquor, and gasps blend into a restless hum. Gere's gone, striding off stage with Sarah by his side, leaving Jimmy Kimmel to himself, his face flushed from the unyielding stance against frivolous activism jabs. The band's riff dies down, and the cameras still rolling, in defiance of the director's instructions. Catch Jimmy's forced attempt to move on. The audience, some still standing, shooting, others bickering, is too charged to resolve, their energy bound to Gere's insistence on serious debate. Backstage, the producers are in disarray. voices colliding as they rush to salvage the night while security hangs around, uncertain what to do. Now that Gere's departed from the stage, Jimmy sits with a cue card, his voice unstable as he attempts to turn. "Well, people, that was Richard Gere," he says, laughing. But the reaction of the crowd is muted, laughter contending with murmurs. He hurries into a piece of the next segment, but the room's not with him yet, still buzzing with Gere's appeal to put human concerns before tabloid spin. The floor producer perspiring cues to continue heading, but the directors at the booth barking about damage control. The ratings giant, but the show balancing. Outside of the green room, Sarah, standing guard as Gere, zips on his coat, his face serene, determined. "They thought they could play him," Sarah mumbles, shaking her head. Gere just hums, his concentration already elsewhere. The studio's energy doesn't recover. Jimmy cuts through the final pieces, his jokes flat, his typical charm blackened by Gere's firm stance. The audience, still posting, tweeting, filming, is more concerned with Gere's walk-off than the show itself. Clips of the battle are going viral online, trending globally, with fans giving kudos to Gere's defense of his humanitarian efforts, others arguing his nasty departure. The producers confer, attempting to spin it. But there is no spinning this. It's a moment that is already larger than the show. A narrative that will be repeated as a talk show legend. Gere, in the meantime, exits the studio into the Los Angeles evening, the distant rumble of the crowd receding behind him. Sarah at his side, scrutinizing her phone, complaining of the internet going mad. "You good?" she asks. Gere nods, his pace steady, like a man who's drawn his line and fought and won. The city's lights glint, but he's inviolate. His gaze fixed on the causes he struggled to make a point about back in the studio. The program slinks towards its conclusion, Jimmy signing off with a strained grin. The audience's applause half-hearted. The walk-off overshadows everything. A raw, unscripted confrontation that laid bare the price of trivializing solemn work against one man's steadfast resolve. This was more than a talk show scuffle. It was Richard Gere composed and blazing down Jimmy Kimmel's superficial jabs and commanding room for substantive issues, leaving an impression no one will ever forget. That is the sort of story that remains, folks. And I'm glad you're here for it. If you're addicted to these intense showdowns, hit that subscribe button to catch more. We're building a crew that loves the real stuff. Drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. Maybe New York, Mumbai, or some small town off the grid. What do you think? Was Gere right to walk? Or did he go too far? Like the video, share it with your friends. And let's keep this conversation alive. Stay bold, stay true, and I'll see you in the next